Welcome to the Nonprofit Coach and Everything DAF podcast, the show that unites leading voices in philanthropy, finance, and nonprofit strategy to help donors, their advisors, and the charities they support thrive. Your host today is Ted Hart, one of the foremost nonprofit thought leaders and the author of The DAF Revolution, Making a Difference in Our Modern World. Each episode features top experts sharing insider tips and real-world strategies in a lively conversational style, whether you're seasoned in the sector or just starting out. Ted lectures around the world, and now he's here for you. Here's Ted Hart.
Hello, and welcome to this episode of the Nonprofit Coach and Everything DAF. I'm your host, Ted Hart, and it's my honor today to be joined by a true national leader in donor advised fund innovation, strategic donor and advisor engagement, and philanthropic growth, making him a perfect guest here on the Nonprofit Coach. Fred Kaynor brings a remarkable track record of growth and innovation in the donor advised fund space. As managing director for relationship management, marketing, and partnerships at DAF Giving 360, formerly Schwab Charitable, he has led efforts that helped grow grantmaking from under $1 billion to over $9 billion. With a 25-year marketing and financial services background that includes roles at MasterCard, Visa, and advertising at Young and Rubicon. He excels at building integrated strategies and engaging donors, advisors, and nonprofits. He also served as a thoughtful spokesperson on philanthropic trends, particularly the power of donor-advised funds to mobilize giving when it matters most. Fred, welcome.
Thanks very much. That's a pleasure to be here.
Fred, I want to thank you and thank your staff as well for being so generous in helping make the DAF revolution, making a difference in our modern world possible. And as you know, today is Giving Tuesday, a day when generosity takes center stage around the world. It's a perfect time to talk about donor-advised funds, year-end giving strategies, and how practical knowledge can help donors and nonprofits make an even greater impact. So here on this final episode of the year, it's especially fitting to reflect on this day, knowing that the DAF Revolution book actually launched 3 months ago. So Fred, from your perspective, why is it important to advance practical and accessible knowledge like this in the world of philanthropy today?
Thanks, Ted, and happy Giving Tuesday to you and to everyone listening to the podcast. There's a host of reasons. I think what's interesting is there is a resolute commitment by our donors, many donors throughout the country, to give on an ongoing basis with maximum impact. They want to do as much as they can with their charitable giving, both on an immediate, short-term, and a long-term sustained basis. They also want to build a legacy beyond themselves so that there is a commitment among multiple generations to the same philanthropic philosophy and dedication that they have. And so what we do in the donor advised space is we try to provide the most efficient, tax smart platform for them to do just that. Giving with the donor advised fund really makes the process of giving a heck of a lot more efficient and easy relative to doing it with a check or cash or credit card or even donating appreciated stock, for example, directly to an operating charity. Giving Tuesday today, as you rightly point out, today is a day to reflect on generosity throughout the year, and it's really a time to celebrate that generosity as we enter the holiday season. What I would say is the beauty of a donor advised fund is it enables these donors to achieve that impact right away. So when they have the resources to give, whatever those resources are, appreciated stock, restricted stock, collectibles, real estate, what have you, they can give that to their donor advised fund right away. They're not obligated to grant it to the charities that they choose to support immediately. They have the latitude, once it's been contributed, to grant those assets out whenever they choose. So many people feel the rush at the holiday season to say, oh my gosh, I have to get that grant into my particular charity, my house of worship, my alma mater before December 31st, or I won't receive any sort of corresponding tax benefits. That's not at all the case. You can give whenever you choose to the donor advised fund, and you can grant out whenever you choose. You've already gotten the tax benefits once you made that contribution to the account. And the beauty is in its flexibility. You can give immediately, you can give over time, you can do whatever is easiest for you, but you're not in that rush to give at the end of the year the way other people may think. So that's a couple of reasons off the top of my head that really demonstrates the commitment to why we want to help these people give with truly maximum impact.
Fred, a big change in your world came a little over a year ago when Schwab Charitable, celebrating its 25th anniversary, reintroduced itself as DAF Giving 360. From a marketing leader's perspective, what was the thinking behind the change, and what should donors and nonprofits take away?
It's a great question, and it was a big deal for our organization. We were established back in 1999 by Chuck Schwab himself, recognizing the need for an efficient solution for clients who prioritize charitable giving as much as they did their savings and investments. So we had that legacy in the name. What we did, it was a very thoughtful, very deliberate approach to celebrating our 25th anniversary by renewing and reinforcing our commitment to the sector and to charitable giving overall. So what we decided to do, Ted, is we wanted to rename and rebrand our organization in a way that was really going to effectively and efficiently promote charitable giving and donor advised funds specifically. So if you take our name, it's DAF Giving 360. Let's divide it into its three parts. DAF, the acronym for donor advised funds, is really the solution that we have embraced on behalf of our clients and their financial advisors to really maximize the impact of their charitable giving with the best solution possible. We want to reinforce DAF, or donor advised funds, as something that people will come to understand and recognize in the same familiar way that they do a 529 account for college savings, a 401k for retirement planning, and so forth. So that is our deliberate intention, to make the acronym DAF and the term donor advised fund more broadly recognized throughout the industry. That's part one. Part two, giving. We're the first organization, to my knowledge, that offers donor advised funds and other philanthropic resources that have focused on the message we really want to reinforce. It's not about something where we're trying to get people to contribute on an enormous basis. We are trying to make giving to their charities as efficient as possible. We're highlighting giving in the name as a commitment to that giving. And then finally, 360, we are a holistic solution. We're not just a donor advised fund. It certainly is, the platform that we embrace and celebrate most, but our commitment is to providing tools and resources, content, everything we can to both donors and the financial advisors who support them to help them achieve maximum impact with their philanthropy. So it's the donor advised platform, the best in class solution. It's educational tools, it's calculators, it's resources, it's content, it's a whole host of things that all come together.
Thank you, Fred. You and I had the opportunity to sit down. I want to thank you again for that, to discuss these topics along with many other aspects of donor advised funds. And I remember it really sticking with me, the emphasis that you placed on the next generation. And in the DAF revolution, you're quoted as saying, next generation demand innovation, alternative grant mechanisms, collaborative philanthropy, and deeper engagement. They don't just want to give, they want to participate in how their giving creates change. It seems the future will require a great deal of thought and adaptation. Can you share with our listeners what that's going to look like?
Oh boy, I wish I had a crystal ball, but I can do my best. We recognize that the next generation is demonstrating an even greater commitment to philanthropy, but it's not just, to your point, giving. It's giving, investing, and ultimately having an impact above and beyond what maybe the former generation had. So here's an example. I remember having a conversation with a next gen donor not too long ago, and they made it very clear that they said to us, my wife and I want to make an impact, even before we grant the dollars to the charities we're supporting. And we dug into that a little bit. What exactly did he mean by that? And he said, well, for example, with a donor advised fund, it's a threefold process. You contribute to the account, you invest the assets hopefully for growth over time, and then ultimately you grant them to the charity. That second part, invest them for potential growth. What they want to do is they want to take a very deliberate, intentional approach to how those assets are invested by the DAF sponsor. Are they aligning with their personal goals and objectives? Are they supporting causes in perhaps an impact investing related way that align with their goals and objectives? Are they really having an impact before they actually take those assets and ultimately grant them to the 501c3 charities that they really want to support? So they're really, really demonstrating a heightened interest in that that part of the donor advised fund equation that relates to those investments. That's one example. Another example is what can they do intentionally to make grants more efficient and have more of an impact. More and more of our donors, particularly the next generation, are finding that they are employing what's called a trust-based approach to philanthropy, meaning they don't want to be too restrictive in what and how they give. For example, designated to a particular scholarship fund or a particular, development at the nonprofit organization. They are employing a process whereby when they select the charity that they choose to support, that they are entrusting them with the assets they want to give so that they know that they're going to go to the area which is where the greatest need is and where the opportunity is to have the greatest impact. And so that's another thing that we're seeing a significant growth in, particularly among next gen donors, less restrictive, less prescriptive, and more empowering for the charities that they choose to support to utilize the assets that they give in whatever way they feel is most appropriate. So those are a couple of ideas.
That's a great look into the future. We're going to take a very quick break. And when we come back, Fred's going to help every listener today be prepared for this giving season. We'll be right back.
If you're enjoying this conversation and want to learn more, the DAF Revolution is your practical guide to turning donor-advised funds into real impact. Packed with insights from over 120 experts, including today's guest, it covers philanthropy, finance, law, nonprofits, and technology. Get the DAF Revolution now on Amazon or wherever you buy your favorite books.
And we're back. Fred, as we enter the final weeks of the year in this critical giving season, what steps can donors, advisors, and nonprofits take right now to make the most of DAF charitable giving and grant making?
Yeah, it's a great question. And there's a lot of things that we can do. Just to name a few, the sooner you can get your contribution in, particularly if it's non-cash contribution, a non-cash asset that's highly appreciated and held for a year or more, the sooner the better. And why is that? Because if you're contributing that type of asset, and by the way, from our perspective, we see that almost well over 60% of contributions made to our donor advised platform are in the form of non-cash assets. So that is something that people are embracing more and more. And just really quickly as an aside, the reason for that is because sometimes the appreciated non-cash asset will have more of an impact ultimately on the charities that they choose to support. We accept them, we liquidate them, they potentially avoid the capital gains tax exposure that they would otherwise incur if they sold them themselves and donated the proceeds. That means theoretically up to 20% more going to the charities that they're supporting. So that was just a side plug. But the reality of the situation is when people give during the holidays, during the fourth quarter, it really is by far and away the busiest time for charitable giving. And it puts pressure on solutions like ours to be able to liquidate those assets in a timely fashion. So the more, again, as I said before in the podcast, people aren't obligated to donate to their donor advised fund at the holiday season. They can donate at any time. So if they can donate those and make those contributions, earlier in the year, and then choose to recommend grants to the charities they choose to support, it would make it a lot more efficient and a lot easier for the donor advised fund to process both the contributions and the grant recommendations quickly and efficiently.
So let's break it down just a little bit further for the donor. Certainly, as you just pointed out, there's this opportunity for potentially a double tax deduction or reduction. So avoidance of capital gains tax and a possibility of a charitable gift deduction. But let's talk about advisors at this time of year and what they can be doing to help their clients succeed.
It's a great question. And we work with several thousand advisors, and we are seeing, Ted, an exponential growth, by the way, among investment advisors from family offices and alike in embracing charitable giving as a priority as part of their practice, because we're seeing more and more donors prioritizing it as part of their overall wealth planning process. So that's a great question. And of course, they want to do whatever they can to help with that process. Many of our advisors are equally committed to making this process as efficient as possible. They work with their clients throughout the year to make sure that what they're doing is taking the most efficient approach to how they give, what they give, the vehicles they choose to use when they're giving, and so forth. So they plan out this entire structure, a philanthropic or charitable plan, if you will, and they go through that plan with them chronologically. So they'll start from, what are your goals and objectives? What are you trying to support? How are you trying to support it? What vehicles do you think would work best for you? Would it be a donor advised fund? Would it be a donor advised fund and a foundation, a remainder trust, an annuity, what have you? They select the vehicles and then they establish the process for granting and giving. And so advisors are extremely thoughtful and consultative when they work with these clients to make sure that they achieve maximum impact with how and what they give. They face the same thing that we do in the fourth quarter. It's challenging for them as much as it is for a donor advised fund if everything is highly concentrated in the fourth quarter when everybody's giving so much. So again, I think advisors would agree that, in order to embrace this plan that is sort of chronologically laid out, to give them ample time to ensure that they're contributing the right asset at the right time that makes the most sense from an impact perspective is what they want to ultimately achieve. It's really planning the process and making sure that they're not caught behind the eight ball and giving at the 11th hour in December, for example. That's something I think an objective.
They can help their clients be a little bit more planful. Let's focus on nonprofits, because you mentioned appreciated stock and other illiquid or complex assets. And let's face it, I think over the last few years, for nonprofits, donor advised funds have sort of been a blessing and a curiosity, because it's just a very different, like we call it, a DAF revolution. It's a different way for money to move. But one of the benefits for nonprofits is centered around this concept of illiquid and complex assets, which donors, and you've certainly proven at DAF Giving 360, donors, as you said, 60% of them want to give other than cash. For a lot of nonprofits, that's a very difficult high bar. They don't have to worry about it if they're giving into a DAF. The cash is going to go to the charity.
That's right. That's exactly right. And so there's a couple of points I want to make as to, how donor advised funds are advantageous and supportive of the nonprofits that our donors support, and how nonprofits can look to donor advised funds as a resource. Many nonprofits, as you know, Ted, vary in terms of size and resources. There are some very large ones with lots of resources, which is great. There are those that are medium and small and CBOs, which have barely a handful of staff. A donor advised fund is an incredible resource to those organizations that aren't necessarily as large and mature with a sizable staff to handle illiquid contributions. We do it for them. We do it entirely for them. So they don't have to worry about accepting a stock or a building or land. Those assets are donated and contribute to the donor advised fund. We liquidate those assets on their behalf, and we expedite the process of the proceeds of that liquidation going directly to the charity. So ultimately, all the charity has to worry about or think about is receiving the actual grant, as opposed to how do I handle the complexity and the potential administrative cost with accepting illiquid assets. That is a huge benefit that donor advised funds in general offer to these nonprofits. I also think, Ted, that there's an opportunity for nonprofits to figure out how to engage more effectively with donor advised funds from a fundraising and development purpose. We're seeing a lot of contraction in terms of federal funding in a number of different ways, which has been very challenging for nonprofits, very, very challenging. And donor advised funds are sort of a beautiful vehicle because they are economically resilient, regardless of whether there's market fluctuation or volatility politically or in any other way. Again, this account has already enabled these donors to set aside assets for charitable giving once they've been contributed. So irrespective of what might be happening externally, those assets and resources are already there. And I think the nonprofits have a great opportunity to find a way to engage more effectively with donor advised funds and with the donors that give through donor advised funds. We have on our website a nonprofit toolkit, which, for example, has given a lot of tools and resources to nonprofits that can help educate them on what we are and educate them on how to engage with us and our donors in a way that is advantageous from a fundraising and development perspective. So those are just a couple of ways that donor advised funds can really be additive and helpful to nonprofits, particularly in sort of volatile times.
And really helpful at this particular time of year. And boy, have your donors stepped up. Recently, you reported that DAF Giving 360 donors made 1.4 million grants with a year-over-year increase of 19%. And granted, do I have this right? $24 million every single day? And if that were not enough, what were some of the other big takeaways from last year?
It's a great question. And in fact, we just reported on our fiscal year 25 results. And let me just share with you some new information. This fiscal year, there was a total of $8.9 billion in grants to charitable organizations. That was a 34% increase in grants to charities from the previous year, which is extraordinary. And just to your point, it is a remarkable testament to the ongoing generosity of our donors.
But that statistic, Fred, makes it a bit difficult for critics who say you're just hoarding money.
Yeah, we're not. Yeah, well, I wouldn't disagree. I would tend to agree with you, but it really is. I mean, and that is a hard statistic to dispute, because we see the impact that our donors are having. We do whatever we can to make sure that no account or very few accounts lie dormant. When they do, we take steps to make sure that they're actively either contributing to or granting from within a 12-month period. So you're absolutely right. That does sort of fly in the face of the argument that donor advised funds are warehousing funds. But just to continue with that, donors recommended 1.4 million grants, which is a 19% increase over the number of grants that were recommended the previous year. And for the statistic that you were quoting there, for the way we're stating it is, for every contribution made, donors recommended nearly 12 grants to charities. So one contribution, 12 grants to charities, to your point. And that's an average pace of roughly $24 million granted on a daily basis. So
that's an incredible number.
It's a pretty incredible number. It is. And it's a number that we're extremely proud of.
Well, you should be.
And it really does reinforce how engaged and active our donors are with their philanthropy, with their charitable giving, and with their accounts. They recognize that more and more use of donor advised funds enable them to have more and more impact on the causes and charities that they really embrace.
When we sat down, and you mentioned this earlier, but I want to focus on it in a slightly different way. You told me that you have donors who tell you that you want charitable dollars to go to work even before they grant them. And that's a very powerful statement. It means that they want philanthropic capital to have impact even while it's being invested. So they choose investment options aligned with their values, mission-aligned investments. So the money is doing good from the very start all the way through to grant making. So for our listeners, and particularly those who are advisors, donors, and nonprofits, can you help them understand the practical application of these investments?
Sure. So of course, the investment strategies are going to vary, and the objectives and goals are going to vary greatly by donor. Generally speaking, when we have that type of discussion, like the one you referenced, I had not too long ago, it was with an individual, a family that really wanted to understand, what is accessible to them in terms of impact investment related strategies in a donor advised fund. Now, those options vary by solution, by platform, but generally speaking, donor advised funds offer a variety of different options. They offer SRI ESG funds, which enable people to allocate some of their investments in a way that align with worthy causes and achieving an impact, not only financially, but also in terms of in terms of social impact. So it sort of balances both the financial and the social together. And then there are other options. There are funds that relate specifically to a particular cause, green funds, or renewable energy funds, or global education funds, things like that. So they can work with their advisor depending upon the size of their account and how they're deploying it. They can work with their advisors to identify funds that are approved on our platform to be able to engage and invest in those in a manner that truly aligns with what they're trying to accomplish. So there are so many investment options depending upon the type of account that they use, the size of the account that they use, and how they're employing their advisor to support them in that regard. It is really powerful to think about the impact that they can have just with the deliberate approach to their investment strategy, even before they grant to the charities.
But again, a big part of the DAF revolution, right? Because the average donor didn't have that opportunity for contributions that had already been made. to be part of the advising how they get used and in the investment opportunities.
That's right. I mean, and with the donor advised fund, again, in our particular case, for example, we have gradations or different kinds of accounts. So we have a core account, which is generally self-directed. That has 15 different investment pools that people can choose from, and they balance and rebalance their account as they choose. Again, if you know, it could be a very conservative index, it could be aggressive growth, it can be impact related. It could be a mix or, any sort of combination of those investment options. And that's for our core platform where the majority of our donors utilize our solution. Then we have what's called a PMA, which is a professionally managed account. And with an increased balance and one that's an account that's advised by an investment advisor, there are a host of additional investment options that are accessible to them that the advisor can actually recommend on their behalf. So the advisor can identify, they can work closely with their client, identify what their particular passions and interests are, and they can identify investment options in that particular kind of solution that align with what they're trying to achieve. So yeah, it's a unique opportunity for donors to utilize a platform like ours, which has almost immediate access to a wealth of different investment options, whatever their goals may be. And it is something that is really quite remarkable to see how they've used it. And I would say also, Ted, that there's the amount of growth that we've seen, incremental growth that we've seen, just by virtue of the wealth of investment options that we offer has been remarkable. And that too is yet another demonstration of how donor advised funds can help to elevate the impact that our donors are having today.
And the opportunity for charitable grants in the future. And that's one of the other parts of the DAF revolution is, donors used to, and particularly this time of year, would sort of rush to choose their charities and get the contribution out the door, and didn't really have in the middle of the holidays and family and everything else that's going on, the opportunity to step back and be strategic about where they would like to grant and the kind of opportunities that they would like to provide. Now they can do that, but they can also have those funds be invested, as you said, hopefully increase in value so that even more money will go to charities than it would have otherwise.
That's exactly right. And that 100% spot on. And another thing that's very interesting is people utilize their accounts in different ways. Let me give you one more example, if I may. We had donors, a married couple who were both physicians. They were both surgeons, actually, and their goal was upon retirement, they wanted to build a cleft palate facility in Central America. And they had, annual charitable giving goals where they would give to their alma mater and so forth. But they were trying to accumulate assets to be able to fund the building of this facility upon their retirement. So they used their account in a beautiful way. They used it for immediate, short-term, or annual gifts that they wanted to process, but they were also using it as a way to build a resource that would ultimately enable them to fund their ultimate charitable goal from a long-term perspective. And they did just that. Now they have a clinic operating in Guatemala that is it's just a remarkable success story. So yeah, it really provides that immense flexibility for these individuals to really achieve maximum impact, both short and long term.
I'm sure that story is going to inspire a lot of listeners today. Fred, as you know, during this giving season, and as we've mentioned a few times here, but let's not lose sight of the fact that 100% of all the assets in every donor advised fund must go to nonprofits and charitable causes. So let's go back to something that we were talking about earlier, but focus as we end the podcast today. How can donor advised funds be most useful to nonprofit organizations as they plan their year ahead?
One way is to educate themselves on what donor advised funds are and what they aren't. Donor advised funds, people have suggested that donor advised funds disintermediate their donors from the nonprofits. We don't at all. We are simply a vehicle that their donors are selecting for charitable giving purposes to maximize their charitable impact. We don't disintermediate under any circumstance. So the first thing is to educate themselves on what donor advised funds are and really what they aren't. I think becoming more familiar with and friendly with what this type of solution is will enable these nonprofits to understand how they can utilize them in a way that is additive to their annual planning and forecasting. So that's the first thing. Just understand them better. Once they have taken the time to really truly understand the platform, the next step is to understand how they can engage them. What can they do to effectively engage donor advised funds, both the platforms themselves and the donors that utilize them, in a way that is going to be additive to them. So on their website, promote and engage donors by saying, we happily accept gifts from donor advised funds, not just credit cards, not just, electronic transfers, but donor advised funds. And there's a lot of different options that they can consider for doing that. Then engage in a discussion with the donor advised funds. Share with them who you are, what you do, the great work that you do, the impact that you have, the fact that you have a number of donors that utilize DAF Giving 360, for example, and give through our donor advised fund platform, and help us understand more about your solution so that we can understand how we can be more additive to helping you in achieving your overall fundraising goals on an annualized basis. It's developing a relationships. It's getting to know who we are, educating yourself on what DAFs are and the benefits that they offer, and ultimately engaging with those DAF organizations in a way where there's a relationship built, familiarity with the organization and familiarity with the solution. That would be my recommendation.
So well said, Fred, because I think for a lot of nonprofit organizations, one of the first steps is to realize that when you find out that you have someone on your list who has a donor advised fund, guess what? They've already given.
Right.
They've already decided to give. They're already donors. You don't have to convince them to give. All you have to do is make the case for why they should advise the gift to your organization. So it should be some of the best news you've ever heard.
Exactly.
When someone says, yes, I have a donor advised fund.
That's exactly right. They've already made the contribution. They've already, received a fair market value tax deduction for the contribution at the time it was made. It's in the account growing, and it just needs to be granted to the charity. That's 100% correct. 100%.
Fred, I can't thank you enough for your time. I could just go on and on chatting with you about donor advised funds, but I know this is a very busy time of year for you and all of your colleagues at DAF Giving 360. So I want to thank you for being here on The Nonprofit Coach and for making the DAF revolution a reality. Thank you for the vital work that you do every day. Your leadership continues to inspire and help communities here at home and around the world. To our listeners, if you enjoyed today's episode, please be sure to follow wherever you get your favorite podcasts. And make sure that you pick up your own copy of The DAF Revolution, Making a Difference in Our Modern World, available on Amazon or wherever you buy your favorite books. Until next time, I'm Ted Hart, and this is The Nonprofit Coach and Everything DAF.
You've been listening to The Nonprofit Coach and Everything DAF with Ted Hart. Follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you enjoy your favorite shows. And don't forget to pick up Ted's newest book, The DAF Revolution, available now on Amazon and at booksellers everywhere. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time on The Nonprofit Coach.